The phone call came in the dead of night. Her boss, his voice urgent, laced with something I couldn't place. "Don't tell the kids," he said, "but you need to come right away." I didn't know what was waiting for me at her office. I didn't know Westry Sense can stace. But I knew, deep down, nothing would ever be the same again. David had always thought he knew everything about his wife, Sarah. Their life together was routine, steady, and comforting. But when she unexpectedly passed away, a call from her boss sent David to her workplace, demanding his immediate presence. Confused, anxious, and uncertain, he found himself walking into a world he hadn't known existed, and it was about to turn everything he thought he knew upside down. In the silence of that night, a hidden truth was about to unravel, and with it, the calm life he had carefully constructed for himself and their children would slip away, leaving behind only questions and a deep sense of betrayal. The clock ticked too loudly in the quiet. Its sharp, steady rhythm seemed to echo against the walls of the empty room. I sat on the couch, staring at the space where Sarah's chair used to be. It was still, too still. The lamp next to me cast a soft glow, but it didn't feel warm, just empty. I shifted, rubbing my thumb against the worn fabric of the armrest, the familiar scent of old wood and dust mixing with the faint, smell of Sarah's perfume that still lingered in the air. Then the phone rang. I hadn't expected the sound. It sliced through the silence, harsh and sudden. I blinked, staring at the phone on the table, my hand hovering, hesitant. My stomach turned. It was late, far too late for anyone to call, especially anyone from Sarah's work. "Yeah," I picked up the receiver, my fingers brushing the cold plastic, and brought it to my ear. "Mr. Thomas?" The voice on the other end was familiar but strained. Sarah's boss, Mr. Langley. His words were rushed, clipped. "It's urgent. I need you to come to Sarah's office right away." A chill ran through me. "Is something wrong?" I asked, my voice unsteady. There was a pause, too long. I could feel his hesitation, even through the phone. I can't explain everything over the phone. Just please don't tell the kids. Not yet. It's important." I stood up slowly, the weight of his words settling on my shoulders. "What's going on?" I asked, but he had already hung up. The line went dead, leaving only the echo of his final words hanging in the air. The silence returned. Was time, not the wrong to now ride. But this time it was different. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. I stared at the phone for a long moment, my thoughts spinning. Sarah's death was still so fresh. The ache of it, the hollow space she left behind, was still too raw to touch, and now, this call. It didn't make sense. What was so urgent that I couldn't even tell the kids? What was so important that Mr. Langley couldn't explain over the phone? I reached for my coat, fingers trembling as I slid it on. The weight of the room pressed in on me, but I couldn't stay here. Not with the questions hanging in the air unanswered, not with the way Mr. Langley's voice had cracked. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I couldn't ignore it. Not now, not after everything. The house felt even emptier as I walked toward the door, each step echoing in the stillness. The kids were asleep upstairs, unaware of what was happening, of the secret I was about to step into. I reached for the keys, my fingers cold against the metal. I paused for a moment, looking back at the house, at the space we'd shared, and something inside me tightened. This wasn't just another late-night meeting. There was something deeper, something hidden, and it was waiting for me just outside that door. The door clicked shut behind me, the sound louder than it should have been in the quiet of the night. I stood for a moment on the porch, staring out at the empty street, the moon casting long shadows on the pavement. The world outside felt still, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I walked to the car, the cold air biting at my skin, and slid into the driver's seat. The engine purred to life, the headlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating the road ahead. I drove in silence, the hum of the tires against the road the only sound. Each mile felt like it stretched farther than the last, the weight of Mr. Renfrew's mile. Langley's words growing heavier with every turn. The city was quiet, the streets almost deserted. I passed by familiar places, but nothing felt familiar anymore. Not after the way Sarah's life had been torn away. The world I thought I knew felt like it was slipping out of my grasp, and the fear in my chest wouldn't subside. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I knew that whatever it was about to change everything. I pulled into the parking lot of Sarah's office building, the tall structure looming ahead. The building was dark, only a few lights still flickering in the windows. I parked the car and sat there for a moment, the engine running, the warmth of the car a stark contrast to the cold air outside. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my heart racing. What was so urgent that Mr. Langley couldn't explain? Why couldn't I tell the kids? The questions swirled in my mind like a storm, but no answers came. I glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. The world outside felt even quieter now, like it was waiting for me to make my next move. I opened the car door and stepped out into the night, the cold air sharp against my skin. My breath puffed out in small clouds dissipating into the darkness. The building felt like it was swallowing me up as I approached the entrance. The door slid open with a soft hum, and I stepped inside. The lobby was empty, but the low hum of the fluorescent lights above seemed almost too loud. The walls, stark and white, felt like they were closing in, pressing down on me as I moved toward the elevator. I pressed the button and waited, my thoughts running faster than the time. My reflection in the elevator doors was pale and unfamiliar. The man looking back at me wasn't the man I knew. The weight of this night, the call, the secrecy, the unknown, had already begun to change me, and I hadn't even seen what was coming. The elevator doors opened with a soft ping. I stepped inside, the faint sound of my breath the only thing I could hear. And what could possibly be so urgent that I couldn't even tell the kids? And why deep down did I already know that my life would never be the same again? The building loomed above me, tall and distant in the early morning light. The glass doors reflected the cloudy sky, distorting my own image like a ghost. I stood outside for a moment, the cool air settling in my chest. My footsteps echoed as I walked in, the floor smooth beneath my shoes, too clean, too quiet. The hum of the fluorescent lights above was the only sound that filled the space, and even that felt unnatural, sharp and sterile, like it didn't belong here. Yeah, I paused at the entrance, inhaling deeply, trying to calm the rush of uncertainty inside me. This was Sarah's world, but it didn't feel like hers anymore. The lobby was still the kind of stillness that felt heavy, almost oppressive. Normally, this office would be alive with chatter, phones ringing, a low buzz of activity. But now the silence wrapped around me like a blanket, thick and suffocating. The walls seemed to close in, the bright white lighting reflecting off every surface. Too clean, too perfect. Everything was in its place, but none of it felt right. I stood there, my eyes scanning the room. A receptionist's desk, neatly stacked papers, the faint scent of coffee lingering in the air. No one was here. No one but me. King. I felt the knot tighten in my stomach as I moved forward, the polished floor gliding beneath my feet. The hall was empty, every door shut and quiet. When I reached Sarah's office, the door was ajar, just enough to make me hesitate before stepping inside. I pushed it open, mister. Langley was standing near the window, his back to me. The blinds were drawn, but the dim light from outside made his shadow stretch across the room, distorted against the white wall. He didn't turn when I entered. I cleared my throat, the sound too loud in the stillness. Mr. Langley? My voice cracked slightly. I hadn't expected it to, but it did. The tension in the room hung in the air like smoke. He turned slowly, his face tight. His eyes darted briefly to mine, then away, his gaze unsettled. David, he said, his voice lower than usual. Thank you for coming, I nodded, but I could feel the chill of the room seeping into my bones. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something bigger than the simple, quiet conversation I had expected. Sarah? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Langley looked at me again, but this time his eyes lingered, just a moment too long. He cleared his throat and turned away, his fingers briefly touching the edge of her desk. I need to explain some things, he said, his words coming out carefully. Things Sarah never shared with you. Okay. The weight of his words landed in my chest like a stone. What do you mean? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. I was already afraid of the answer, but I had to know he didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer to the desk and reached for something on the corner, a folder, thick, official looking. He set it down in front of me, the sound of it hitting the surface too loud. He didn't open it, just pushed it toward me. Sarah was involved in something confidential, Mr. Langley said quietly. Something she couldn't talk about, not even to you. And my fingers hovered over the folder, but I didn't touch it. I couldn't. The silence in the room felt heavier now, and I could feel the walls pressing in. I looked at him, waiting for him to explain, waiting for him to tell me what Sarah had been hiding. His eyes flicked to the side again, and I noticed the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands clenched at his sides. She never wanted you to know, he continued, his voice thick with something I couldn't place. She kept it from you because of what it would mean for you, for your family. Yeah. I felt a cold wave wash over me, making my breath catch. What was she involved in? I asked, the question catching in my throat, Mr. Langley seemed to shrink, his shoulders rounding in on themselves. He hesitated for a long moment, his eyes darting around the room. as if searching for the right words that would make it all better. But there was no making it better, not anymore. She was working on something, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Something that involved people, powerful people. People who would do anything to protect their secrets. The words hit me like a punch. Powerful people, secrets. My heart started to race, and I couldn't swallow the lump in my throat. Why didn't she tell me? I whispered. I don't know, Mr. Langley said, his voice faltering. She didn't think it was safe. Not for you. Not for the kids. But it was too late. It had already gone too far. Eka, I felt a wave. I felt a wave of nausea. A cold sweat breaking out along my back. I stepped back from the desk, trying to steady myself. What did she do? What was it? I could barely get the words out. The room was spinning. The life I thought I knew, the woman I thought I knew, felt farther away with every breath, Mr. Langley exhaled slowly, his face pinched with regret. I can't tell you everything, David, but I can tell you this. Sarah was involved in something dangerous, something that threatened more than just her job, and now, he paused, his voice fading, and he looked at the folder again. Now it's too late. Count. I stood there, my legs feeling weak, the room closing in. The silence was deafening, and the hum of the lights above felt like it was rattling my skull. I could barely hear Mr. Langley's next words, could barely understand the reality of what was happening. All I could think about was Sarah, my Sarah, the woman I thought I knew, the woman I had shared a life with. The woman who had kept something so deep, so dangerous, hidden from me. I had spent my life trusting her, believing that we were a team, that we shared everything. But now I was standing in a room that wasn't even hers anymore. I didn't know how long I stood there, staring at the folder, feeling the weight of her secrets press down on me, but eventually I managed to breathe again. The air felt thick with questions. Too many questions, Mr. Langley shifted, his eyes on me, but I couldn't look at him anymore. I couldn't stand to. I turned and walked toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. And before I left, I glanced back over my shoulder. He was still standing by her desk, his face shadowed by the dim light. And I realized in that moment that I didn't know how to go back. Not to the way things had been, not after everything I had learned. The photograph felt heavy in my hands, though it wasn't much to look at. Just a picture, a moment frozen in time. But there was something about it, something off. I stared at the edges, the slightly curled corners, the way the paper felt old and unfamiliar, like it had been hidden away for too long. Mr. Langley's hand trembled just as mine did when he passed it to me. I could feel the weight of it, but I couldn't bring myself to look at it for more than a moment. But when I did, I couldn't look away. The office felt smaller now, the air thicker. The sharp hum of the fluorescent lights overhead suddenly seemed too loud, echoing in the tight corners of the room. I was seated across from Mr. Langley, but the space between us felt vast, wider than any room could hold. His eyes kept darting to the floor, to the window, anywhere but at me. I could sense the hesitation in him, but it was my own breath that caught in my chest. This wasn't just a conversation anymore. It was a quiet unraveling of everything I thought I knew. For Kakin, he had been talking, explaining things, Sarah's work, her secrets, the dangers she'd been involved in, but I hadn't been able to focus on his words, not until the photograph. My hands were shaking as I took it, the edges of the picture cold against my skin. It was a photo of Sarah, smiling. But she wasn't smiling at me. She wasn't smiling at anyone I recognized. There was a man beside her, a man I'd never seen before, his arm around her waist, his smile too familiar. Too intimate. I let the photo slip slightly between my fingers, my heart thudding in my chest. This wasn't the Sarah I knew. I looked up at Mr. Langley. His eyes were downcast, but I could feel his gaze on me, like a weight pressing on my shoulders. He opened his mouth to speak, but his voice faltered. For a moment, I thought I might hear something that would make sense of all of this. Who is he? I asked, my voice tight. The words seemed to hang in the air, too simple, too quiet. But they were the only words I could find, Mr. Langley swallowed, his lips pressing together in a thin line. He hesitated again, shifting in his chair. He was important to her, he said slowly, his voice barely a whisper. More than you think, but I don't know everything, David. I can't tell you everything. I stared at the man in the photo. His face was too calm, too confident, as if he belonged there, with her. The smile he wore was more than a smile of friendship. It was something else, something that made my stomach twist. Why didn't she tell me about him? I asked, though I wasn't sure I even wanted to know the answer. My fingers clenched around the edges of a photograph, the glossy paper crinkling ever so slightly. Why didn't Sarah tell me, Mr. Langley shifted again, his gaze flicking toward the door? I don't know. I don't know why she kept it from you, he muttered, but he was involved in everything. Everything Sarah worked on, and he was a part of things that you didn't know about, and I couldn't tear my eyes away from the photo. The man's face was so damn familiar, like a shadow I couldn't place, and Sarah's smile was something I didn't recognize, a version of her I wasn't allowed to see. The room felt smaller, tighter, and the weight of the photograph in my hands grew unbearable. The quiet tension in the air made it hard to breathe. The walls seemed to close in, like I was suffocating on something I couldn't name. I didn't want to ask, but I had to. The words spilled out before I could stop them. Hornushan words conswasten. I could stop them. Was she involved with him? My voice barely sounded like mine, trembling in the air between us, mister. Langley's eyes shifted, and for a moment I thought he might turn away completely, but he didn't. His lips parted, but no words came for a long moment. When he spoke, it wasn't with the calm, measured tone I was used to. It was raw, almost strained. I don't know everything, David, he repeated, but this time his voice held something else, something darker. I'm not sure if she ever told you everything, but he was part of her life, a big part for not she ever told you everything. But he was part of her life, a big part. I just never thought you should know about it. I didn't think you'd want to know. His words didn't make sense. They didn't line up with the woman I knew. This Sarah, the one in the picture, with this stranger, didn't belong to the life I had shared with her. Ray Nimberther, the life I had thought I knew. This wasn't the woman who had made dinner for us every night, the one who had tucked the kids in bed, the one who smiled at me across the table. This was someone else entirely, a woman I wasn't sure I recognized anymore. Kemma. My hands were still shaking as I set the photo down on the desk between us. The image of Sarah smiling so casually with this man felt like it was burning into my mind. I wanted to ask more, I wanted to scream and shout, demand answers. But there was something else pulling me back, something quieter, more insistent. I stood up slowly, the chair scraping against the floor, a sound too sharp in the thick silence of the room. I need to know more, I said, though I wasn't sure if I meant it. The words felt like they had no weight behind them. I wasn't sure I wanted to know more. But I couldn't leave this room without understanding what Sarah had kept hidden from me. I turned to leave, my footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. As I reached the door, I paused, looking back at Mr. Langley. His face was still shadowed, his eyes distant. What do I do now? I asked quietly, unsure if I was asking him or myself. He didn't answer, just looked away, and that was all I needed to know. The door clicked shut behind me, and I stepped into the hallway. The fluorescent lights above flickered, casting long, harsh shadows across the walls. My breath felt shallow, as if the air was too thin here, too empty. I stood for a moment, my hand resting on the doorknob, staring at the space in front of me. The world outside the office felt too far away, too far removed from the truth that was unfolding here. My hands still trembled, but I didn't know what to do next. All I had now were more questions and a photo of a man who was once so close to Sarah, a man I had never known, and I was standing in a life I no longer recognized. The weight of it was more than I could carry. The air was colder than I expected when I stepped outside the office building, the sharp bite of winter cutting through the thin fabric of my coat. I could hear my footsteps in the silence, too loud, too steady, against the soft hum of the city. My hands were shoved deep into my pockets, but it didn't seem to stop the shaking. It was as if the cold had moved inside me, a chill that wouldn't let go. I stared at the building for a moment, the glass reflecting the dull sky, and wondered how much more of Sarah's life had been hidden behind its walls. I hadn't planned to leave the office so soon, but the weight of Mr. Langley's words was pressing on me. There was too much I hadn't known about Sarah, and every word he spoke only led to more questions. My mind was spinning, trying to piece together a woman I thought I understood, the woman I married. But this wasn't the woman I knew. I had spent the last few days trying to make sense of her death, of the hole she left behind. But nothing felt like it had been explained, not really, not fully. And now, with every revelation, I felt like I was losing grip on the reality I thought we shared. I walked a little further, the weight of my footsteps echoing on the pavement. The questions kept pushing their way to the surface, loud and sharp. What had she been hiding? What had she been working on, and why had she kept it from me? My mind kept circling back to the same question. Why hadn't she trusted me enough to tell me? The evening was creeping in when I returned home, the sky darkening faster than I anticipated. I stood outside the front door for a long moment, my hand on the knob, but I couldn't bring myself to open it just yet. Inside, the house was quiet, empty, a stark contrast to the noise in my mind. I knew the kids were asleep, but there was still the echo of their laughter in my head, their faces flashing through my thoughts. How could I explain this to them? How could I even begin to... The life we'd shared, it wasn't real anymore, not with the things I was learning. The door creaked as I pushed it open. I stepped inside, the familiar scent of home filling the space, but it didn't bring comfort. It only made the emptiness sharper. I walked to the kitchen, my movements slow, as if the weight of the world was settling on my shoulders with each step. My eyes skimmed over the counter, the stack of unopened bills, the leftover takeout containers. Nothing seemed to fit anymore, not with the version of Sarah that was starting to emerge. I glanced at the phone on the counter. The call from Mr. Langley still echoed in my mind. The urgency in his voice, the things he still hadn't told me. I grabbed the phone, staring at it for a long moment before dialing. The phone rang twice before the voice on the other end answered. David? It was Mr. Langley. His voice still had that same nervous edge. Can we talk? I asked, my voice low, steady, but the tightness in my chest made it hard to breathe. There was a pause, then a soft sigh. I didn't mean to overwhelm you earlier, but there's a lot I'm not sure how to explain. Ken duckened. I sat down at the kitchen table, the phone pressed to my ear. I could hear the soft hum of the refrigerator behind me, the faint tick of the clock on the wall. The quiet was overwhelming. I needed answers. I needed to know why Sarah had kept so many things from me. I don't understand, I said, my voice quieter now. What exactly was Sarah working on? What was it that she couldn't tell me, Mr. Langley's sigh on the other end of the line was heavy, like he was trying to piece together the words carefully. It wasn't just work, it was a project that went beyond what we normally do here. She was investigating something that was much bigger than she anticipated. I leaned forward, my pulse quickening. Investigating? What kind of investigation? The silence stretched between us. When he finally spoke, his words were slow, deliberate. I can't give you everything, David. It's not that simple. But she had access to information, sensitive information. It's part of why she had to keep it all from you. It was dangerous. I let the words hang in the air for a moment. Dangerous. Sarah's smile, the way she held my hand every night, the way she tucked the kids into bed, it all felt so far removed from the woman he was describing. A woman I didn't recognize. I rubbed my forehead, trying to stave off the headache that was beginning to form. But why didn't she trust me? Why didn't she tell me what she was doing? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Mr. Langley didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was softer, more sympathetic. She was protecting you, all of you. She didn't want you involved in something that could put your family at risk. She thought she could handle it on her own. I closed my eyes, the pain of his words sinking deep into my chest. She should have told me, I said, barely above a whisper. She should have trusted me. I know, Mr. Langley said. I know, but sometimes, David, people do things they think are right, even if they're not. I let his words sit with me for a moment, but they didn't make me feel any better. Nothing made sense anymore. Not Sarah's secret life. Not the way she kept me at arm's length when I should have been by her side. I stood up slowly, the phone still pressed to my ear. The room felt empty, even though it was still filled with all the things we had shared. The silence around me was suffocating. I need to know everything, I said, my voice steady now, but the weight of the request felt like it was breaking me. All of it. I'll be here, Mr. Langley replied, when you're ready. Again, I hung up the phone, setting it down gently on the table. The quiet was too much, too loud. I looked at the chair across from me, Sarah's chair, and the emptiness that filled it was enough to crush me. The house was still too quiet. The world outside felt so far away, and I wasn't sure if I could ever feel close to it again. I turned, my eyes lingering on the photo of the kids on the mantel. The weight of everything, Sarah's secrets, my own confusion, pressed down on me. But I didn't know where to go from here. I just knew I couldn't keep pretending. The old house creaked as I stepped inside, the wooden floors groaning under my weight. The smell of dust and aged furniture clung to the air, thick and heavy. It felt like a place stuck in time. There were no warm greetings, no welcoming smiles here, just the quiet hum of silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the house. I stood for a moment, my fingers hovering over the doorframe, unsure of whether I should go in or turn back. But I didn't turn back. I couldn't. I had to know. I hadn't seen Leah in years. Sarah's oldest friend, someone I never really got to know, but who always seemed like a part of our life. She was the one Sarah would meet up with, the one who made her laugh in ways I couldn't, who understood the side of Sarah I never had access to. I'd never questioned their friendship until now. Now, every conversation, every shared moment between them felt like it had been a doorway to something I hadn't seen, a hidden chapter in the life Sarah had kept from me. Leah's house was small but comfortable, cluttered with old books and family pictures, the walls lined with memories. But even with all that, it felt like a place where time had stopped. The house told stories of the past, but nothing in it prepared me for the story Leah was about to tell. I stepped into the living room, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and something else I couldn't place. Leah was sitting in a chair by the window, her back to me. The light from outside made her silhouette look fragile, worn. I waited for her to turn, but she didn't. When she finally did, her eyes were tired, haunted. "David," she said, her voice soft, almost too soft. "I didn't think you'd come." I couldn't say anything at first, the words catching in my throat. There was a vulnerability in her face that I didn't expect, a kind of guardedness. I thought maybe I was seeing the wrong thing. But her eyes didn't lie. They were the same eyes Sarah had, eyes that hid secrets, buried too deep to surface. I sat across from Leah, the tension between us like a thick fog. She hadn't offered me tea, hadn't asked if I was comfortable. Instead, she just stared at me, her fingers nervously twisting the fabric of her shirt. "How's the family?" she asked after a long silence, though the question felt hollow, like she already knew the answer. "They're fine," I replied, my voice distant, but I couldn't meet her gaze. Instead, I stared at the chipped mug on the coffee table, feeling the heaviness of her presence pressing down on me. I was here for something else, something more than just idle pleasantries. "I need you to tell me everything, Leah," I said, finally lifting my eyes to meet hers. "About Sarah, about what she was involved in." Leah flinched at my words, her fingers stilling. For a moment, I thought she might not answer. She looked away, her gaze flicking toward the window, and then back at me. Her lips parted as if to speak, but she hesitated. Finally, she exhaled slowly. "She didn't want you to know. She didn't want anyone to know," Leah whispered. "But she got herself caught up in something bigger, something that wasn't just her job anymore." I leaned forward, the silence between us thickening. "What do you mean? What was she involved in?" Leah shifted uncomfortably in her chair. The words seemed to choke her, caught somewhere in the back of her throat. She swallowed hard and met my eyes. "It's not what you think. It wasn't just her work. She was working with people who had a lot of influence, a lot of power. She was part of something that could ruin reputations, careers, even lives." I felt the room close in around me. Hey. The words she was saying, the things she was hinting at, didn't make sense. Sarah involved in something so dangerous? It didn't fit with the life we had built, with the woman I had loved. Leah's eyes dropped to her hands. "David, I didn't know how deep she was in. I tried to talk to her. She wouldn't listen. She thought she could handle it, that she could protect you and the kids from it. But I knew it was getting out of hand." The weight of her words settled over me like a fog. I could barely breathe. Why didn't she tell me? Why didn't she trust me enough to share this with me? Leah paused, her lips pressing together in a tight line. When she spoke again, her voice was strained. "She was trying to protect you," she repeated. "She didn't want you involved. She didn't want you to get hurt. But things went wrong, and now she's gone." I swallowed, the knot in my throat tightening. "What went wrong?" I asked. "What happened?" Leah closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. "She got too close to something. Too close to people who weren't what they seemed, people who would do anything to keep their secrets buried. Sarah wasn't the kind of person to back away, and it cost her." Her words echoed in my head like a heavy drumbeat, each one sinking deeper into me, unraveling the truth about Sarah that I hadn't wanted to face. The woman I had loved, the mother of my children, had been part of something dangerous, something far more complicated than I ever could have imagined. The pain of it, the rawness of the betrayal cut through me like a knife. I thought I knew Sarah. I thought I had understood her. But now it felt like everything I had believed was a lie. She was caught in something, and I couldn't stop her, Leah said, her voice soft but filled with regret. She looked at me again, her eyes holding something I didn't want to see. "I couldn't save her, David. No one could." I sat back in my chair, my hands gripping the armrests, trying to hold on to something, anything, to keep me from falling apart. The truth was starting to spread inside me like wildfire, burning away everything I thought I knew. The room felt colder now. Leah's words hung in the air like smoke, suffocating me with the weight of their meaning. I stood slowly, my legs shaky beneath me. The world outside the window had grown darker, the light fading quickly. It was almost like the night had come to swallow everything whole. Leah stood too, her expression softening, but there was nothing she could say that would undo what I now knew. The woman I had loved, the woman I thought I knew, was gone, and in her place was a stranger. Yonder mandis forfasten senchman vermanda sunfan for Omeyer. Kay, I need to go, I said quietly, my voice strained. Leah nodded, her lips trembling, but she didn't speak. I turned and walked out of the room, my footsteps echoing down the hall. Each one felt heavier than the last, like I was leaving a part of myself behind. I stepped outside, the cold air biting at my face. The street was silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. And as I walked into the night, I wondered how could I ever go back to the life I had before. The door to the cafe chimed as I entered, combrations even-moused. The door to the cafe chimed as I entered, the low hum of conversation filling the air. The scent of stale coffee mingled with the fresh smell of the rain that had started outside. I paused by the door, my eyes scanning the room, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't know what to expect when I'd agreed to meet him, but I didn't expect the stillness, the calm of the place, to mirror the quiet tension that had wrapped itself around me since I'd seen Sarah's photograph with the stranger. The man sat in the far corner, his eyes already fixed on me as I made my way toward him. He didn't look like I thought he would. He wasn't brash or bold, didn't have the kind of face you'd expect for someone so involved in Sarah's secret life. No, his face was gentle, too gentle, almost apologetic. I sat across from him, the chair scraping against the floor, too loud for the quiet that hung between us. He didn't smile, just nodded in acknowledgment. His eyes were dark, but not in the way I imagined them to be, not cold or intimidating, but soft, weighed down by something I couldn't yet understand. David, I assume? His voice was calm, too calm, like he was trying to make the air between us feel less charged. I know who you are, I interrupted, my voice rougher than I intended. The photo still lingered in my mind. Sarah, smiling with him, the man who had been in her life in ways I couldn't yet understand. You were with her, I said, my words barely a whisper. In the picture. He didn't flinch, didn't even blink, just nodded again. I swallowed, the bitterness rising in my throat. And what the hell was that? The words burst out before I could stop them, anger flooding my chest. The man's eyes softened, his gaze moving to the window for a moment. The rain had started to tap lightly against the glass, a rhythmic sound that matched the tension between us. I know this is hard to hear, he said quietly, but I'm not here to hurt you. I just need you to understand, Sarah. She got caught up in something bigger than both of us. He paused, as if searching for the right words, and for a moment, I thought he might say something that made it all make sense, that I would finally understand what had happened, what Sarah had been involved in, why she had kept it from me. But the longer he looked at me, the more it felt like there were pieces of the puzzle that he couldn't quite place. I worked with Sarah on a project, he continued, his voice steady but tinged with regret, a project that got out of hand. We were trying to gather information, not for anyone's gain, but for the truth. But sometimes the truth is a dangerous thing. Cow, his words hung in the air, thick with meaning, but none of it made sense. A project? What kind of project? And how had it led to this moment, to him sitting here across from me, trying to explain everything that was too late to fix? I still don't understand, I said, my voice shaking slightly now, the anger beginning to twist into something else. Something darker, something deeper. Why didn't Sarah tell me? Why didn't she trust me with this? He shifted in his seat, the chair creaking slightly beneath him. She didn't trust anyone, David, not even me, and I don't blame her. His words were heavy now, as if they carried the weight of a truth he was reluctant to share. There were people involved in this who, they weren't what they seemed. People she had to keep at arm's length, even from you. She thought it would protect you, protect your family. The words washed over me, slow and steady, but they didn't clear the fog. They only added to it. This man, this stranger who had shared time with my wife, was speaking like he understood her better than I ever did. I looked at him, his eyes now downcast, his fingers absent-mindedly playing with the edge of his cup. I don't understand, I said again, quieter this time. My chest tightened and a cold sensation washed over me. I don't understand why she would choose you to work with. Why she kept you in her life, why she never told me anything about you. Who are you really? Okay, the man looked up slowly, his face drawn and tired. I didn't choose to be a part of this, David. I didn't choose for things to go the way they did. His voice cracked slightly, but he didn't apologize. I was just someone who wanted to help her, but it wasn't just about her. It was about something much bigger, bigger than the two of us. I stared at him, feeling the sting of betrayal seep into my bones. The more he spoke, the more it felt like the walls around me were crumbling, revealing things I had never wanted to see. Sarah's secrets, her hidden life, they were starting to slip into view, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know what they looked like. Why did she keep it from me? I whispered, barely able to hold the question in. Why didn't she trust me with any of this? Why did she choose to carry this on her own? He didn't answer right away. His eyes flickered to the side, as if the weight of my question had crushed the air between us. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost distant. She thought she was protecting you. But in the end, it didn't matter. He sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. She was caught up in something. Much darker than either of us anticipated. I felt a cold knot twist in my stomach. The man was right in front of me, speaking the truth that I didn't want to hear, yet couldn't turn away from. The woman I had loved, the woman I had spent years with, had been tangled in something so deep. Had been tangled in something so deep, so dangerous that she had kept it from me. I stood slowly, the chair scraping against the floor, and for a moment I just stood there. The rain outside had picked up its rhythm, matching the pulsing ache in my chest. I had come to this meeting seeking answers, but now I was more lost than ever. Kang. The man stood as well, his eyes watching me closely. I know this is a lot to process, he said quietly. But you need to understand, David, Sarah wasn't just trying to keep you in the dark. She was trying to protect you from a world you didn't know existed. I turned away, not sure if I could handle another word, not sure if I wanted to. I don't know how to deal with any of this, I said softly, my voice carrying the weight of my confusion and anger. I don't know what to do with all these secrets. The man didn't follow me as I left the cafe, didn't say another word, and as I stepped out into the rain, my hands trembling, I realized something. Sarah's world, the world she had kept from me, was more dangerous than I had ever imagined, and now I was standing in the middle of it, unsure of who I was anymore. The room felt colder than it should have. I stood in the dim light, my reflection fractured in the dark window, watching the rain spill down in thin sheets. Each drop hit the glass with a soft tap, the sound distant, almost like a warning. I had no idea how long I had been standing there, lost in the rhythm of the storm, but something inside me had shifted. The questions swirling in my mind were starting to settle, each one heavier than the last. And my heart beat faster as I turned around. Mr. Langley was sitting in the corner, watching me silently, waiting for me to say something. But I didn't know what to say anymore. There was nothing left to say. Everything had already been said. I'd asked Mr. Langley to meet me here, away from the office, away from prying eyes. The space felt too small for the weight of the conversation, the air too still. The fluorescent lights flickered once, casting a brief shadow across his face, but neither of us moved. We sat there, each lost in our own thoughts, the silence growing between us like a living thing. Sarah had been part of something I couldn't even comprehend, a covert operation, dangerous connections. Secrets that could destroy everything, that was the picture Langley had painted, piece by piece. But each revelation only led to more questions. I had been asking myself over and over what she had kept from me, but now I didn't know if I could even look at her the same way. Had I been living a lie, or had I just been blind to the truth? I sat down across from him, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. The weight of it all pressed on my chest. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what I was even feeling anymore. But I had to ask. I had to hear the answer, no matter how much it hurt. You told me Sarah was involved in something dangerous, I said quietly, my voice rough. But I need to know everything. Why didn't she tell me? Why didn't she trust me enough to be honest with me, Mr.? Langley's gaze flickered to the floor, his fingers twitching nervously. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out for a moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I expected. She was involved in something far bigger than she ever let on, David. People in power, dangerous people. She had to protect you. She didn't want you caught in the middle. I looked at him, trying to grasp what he was saying, but it didn't make sense. Sarah had been careful, kept her life private, yes, but I had trusted her. We had shared everything, or so I thought. She hadn't kept secrets from me, not the big ones. But now I was sitting here, hearing this man tell me things that felt like they were from another life. A life that had never touched ours and the kids, I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Did she keep them in the dark, too? Was she keeping secrets from them, too? Langley shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his hands now folded in front of him. She didn't want anyone involved, David. She kept it all from you because she thought it was safer that way. She thought it was best for you to stay out of it, to keep your family safe. I leaned forward, my chest tightening. But how could she think that? We were supposed to be partners. She should have trusted me. We should have done this together. My voice broke on the last word, the hurt and anger mixing together in a way I couldn't control. Langley's eyes softened, his expression a mix of regret and sympathy. She didn't want to burden you with it, but the truth is, she was involved with people who were too powerful, too dangerous. And once you're in, there's no getting out. I felt the room spin, the weight of his words pressing down on me. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. This wasn't the woman I had known, the woman I had loved. This was someone else entirely, someone with secrets I had never seen, a life I hadn't been allowed to touch. She didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth, I whispered, my words barely audible in the heavy silence. Was our life together a lie? The question hung in the air, lingering longer than I wanted it to. Langley didn't answer immediately, and when he did, it was with a quiet, sorrowful look in his eyes. No, David, it wasn't a lie. She loved you, but love isn't always enough. Sometimes the truth is too dangerous to share. I sat there staring at him, but it felt like I wasn't really seeing him anymore. The world had started to tilt, and nothing felt solid, nothing felt real. My hands were still trembling, and I clenched them tighter, trying to ground myself in the moment, but the storm inside me was rising faster than I could catch my breath. The anger, the confusion, the heartbreak, they all mingled together, a suffocating weight that I couldn't escape. I don't know how to move forward from this, I said softly, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. I don't know what to believe anymore. Langley didn't speak for a moment. He seemed to hesitate, but then he leaned forward, his gaze steady. You don't have to understand everything right now, David. But you need to know that Sarah did what she thought was best. She made choices that were out of your control. And now you have to decide what you're going to do with all of this. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady as I moved toward the door. The room felt smaller now, suffocating, and the weight of it all pressed against my chest like a vice. And I didn't look back as I reached for the door handle. I couldn't. The silence in the room was deafening, and it felt like I was suffocating in it. The truth that Langley had just laid out before me was more than I could bear. It wasn't just Sarah's secrets, it was the realization that I had been living in a world that wasn't real. Not the one I thought we shared anyway. I stepped into the hallway, the door clicking shut softly behind me. The air outside was cold, the wind whipping through the streets, and I welcomed the chill against my skin. It was the only thing that seemed real anymore. I cowed. As I walked away from the building, the streets blurred around me, my thoughts racing too fast to catch. What was I supposed to do now? How could I go back to a life I no longer understood? And would I ever be able to forgive Sarah for the secrets she kept, for the life she led without me? For the life she led without me? The house was silent again, but this time it felt different. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of the floorboards, it all seemed louder somehow, more oppressive. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the empty table. The chairs were still warm from the last meal we'd shared, but now everything felt hollow, I ran my fingers along the edge of the table, the worn wood smooth beneath my fingertips. I hadn't touched it in days. It felt like I didn't belong here anymore. Like I was standing in a life that no longer existed, no longer made sense. It had been days since the conversation with Langley, days spent trying to make sense of everything I had learned. The secrets, the lies, the betrayal. Each day the questions grew, each one heavier than the last. Why hadn't Sarah told me? Why hadn't she trusted me enough to share this part of her life? Why hadn't she trusted me enough to share this part of her life? I had spent so many years loving her, believing in her, in us. But now it felt like I was looking at a stranger. I could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on me, suffocating me with every breath. I sat at the table, staring at the empty spaces around me. The silence in the house was thick, like the walls were closing in. The kids had been out with their friends, giving me time to think, but there was no clarity, only confusion, doubt, and an overwhelming sense of loss. I had spent years thinking I understood everything about Sarah, about our life. But now it felt like I had never known her at all. The door creaked open and I heard the familiar sound of footsteps coming down the hallway. My heart skipped a beat. I stood up, wiping my hands against my pants, and turned to face them. The kids, my 2 children, walked in, their faces tired but familiar. "Hey, Dad," Emma said, her voice soft. She looked at me with those eyes, the same eyes as Sarah's, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she knew something I didn't. That they both knew something they weren't telling me. I forced a smile, trying to push the tension down. "Hey, sweetheart, how was your day?" "Fine," she replied, her gaze flicking toward her brother Lucas, who was standing just behind her. He hadn't said a word, his expression unreadable. The weight of the silence between us felt heavier with each passing second. I need to talk to you two, I said, the words coming out before I could think about them. The knot in my stomach tightened as I saw the hesitation in their eyes. About your mom. Emma looked at Lucas, and he shifted uncomfortably, his fingers fiddling with the strap of his backpack. What about Mom? Emma asked, her voice cautious. I sat down again, my hands resting on the table, palms flat against the worn surface. I've been learning some things, I started, my voice faltering slightly. About your mom's life. Things she kept hidden from me. I saw them exchange another glance, and that was all it took. The silence spoke louder than words ever could. I leaned forward, my heart racing. Did you know about any of this? I asked, my voice quieter now, more desperate. Did she tell you anything? They didn't answer right away. Emma opened her mouth as if to speak, but stopped, her lips pressed tight together. Lucas shifted again, his eyes avoiding mine. The silence between us was suffocating. I couldn't take it anymore. What aren't you telling me? I asked, my voice sharp. It wasn't anger that filled me, it was fear. Fear of what they might know, what they might have known all along. Finally, Lucas spoke, his voice small, almost like he was speaking from a distance. She didn't want us to get involved, Dad, he said quietly, not looking up. She didn't want us to know what she was doing. We didn't ask questions because we knew she was trying to protect us. I felt a pang of guilt stab at my chest. Protect us? She had kept a secret life from me, from all of us, and now my kids, who I thought I had a handle on, were telling me things I wasn't prepared to hear. She didn't trust me enough to tell me, I whispered, more to myself than to them. The question had been building in me for days, and now it slipped out without control. What Thomasing for Shever cans as im b am I as a tie. Emma's face softened for a moment, but her voice was steady. She didn't want you to get hurt, Dad. She didn't think you could handle it. She didn't think any of us could. The words hit me like a punch, so she thought I wouldn't be strong enough to know the truth? To be with her through whatever this was? I asked, but even as I spoke I realized how pointless it was to ask. She had already made her choice. She had chosen to keep everything from me, from all of us. Is that why you've been so distant? I asked, turning my attention to Lucas. He shifted uncomfortably again. David, I assume? His voice was calm, too calm, like he was trying to make the air between us feel less charged. I know who you are, I interrupted, my voice rougher than I intended. The photo still lingered in my mind. Sarah, smiling with him, the man who had been in her life in ways I couldn't yet understand. You were with her, I said, my words barely a whisper. In the picture. He didn't flinch, didn't even blink, just nodded again. I swallowed, the bitterness rising in my throat. And what the hell was that? The words burst out before I could stop them, anger flooding my chest. The man's eyes softened, his gaze moving to the window for a moment. The rain had started to tap lightly against the glass, a rhythmic sound that matched the tension between us. I know this is hard to hear, he said quietly, but I'm not here to hurt you. I just need you to understand, Sarah. She got caught up in something bigger than both of us. He paused, as if searching for the right words, and for a moment, I thought he might say something that made it all make sense, that I would finally understand what had happened, what Sarah had been involved in, why she had kept it from me. But the longer he looked at me, the more it felt like there were pieces of the puzzle that he couldn't quite place. I worked with Sarah on a project, he continued, his voice steady but tinged with regret, a project that got out of hand. We were trying to gather information, not for anyone's gain, but for the truth. But sometimes the truth is a dangerous thing. His words hung in the air, thick with meaning, but none of it made sense. A project? What kind of project? And how had it led to this moment, to him sitting here across from me, trying to explain everything that was too late to fix? I still don't understand, I said, my voice shaking slightly now, the anger beginning to twist into something else. Something darker, something deeper. Why didn't Sarah tell me? Why didn't she trust me with this? He shifted in his seat, the chair creaking slightly beneath him. She didn't trust anyone, David, not even me, and I don't blame her. His words were heavy now, as if they carried the weight of a truth he was reluctant to share. There were people involved in this who, they weren't what they seemed. People she had to keep at arm's length, even from you. She thought it would protect you, protect your family. The words washed over me, slow and steady, but they didn't clear the fog. They only added to it. This man, this stranger who had shared time with my wife, was speaking like he understood her better than I ever did. I looked at him, his eyes now downcast, his fingers absent-mindedly playing with the edge of his cup. I don't understand, I said again, quieter this time. My chest tightened and a cold sensation washed over me. I don't understand why she would choose you to work with. Why she kept you in her life, why she never told me anything about you. Who are you really? Okay, the man looked up slowly, his face drawn and tired. I didn't choose to be a part of this, David. I didn't choose for things to go the way they did. His voice cracked slightly, but he didn't apologize. I was just someone who wanted to help her, but it wasn't just about her. It was about something much bigger, bigger than the two of us. I stared at him, feeling the sting of betrayal seep into my bones. The more he spoke, the more it felt like the walls around me were crumbling, revealing things I had never wanted to see. Sarah's secrets, her hidden life, they were starting to slip into view, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know what they looked like. Why did she keep it from me? I whispered, barely able to hold the question in. Why didn't she trust me with any of this? Why did she choose to carry this on her own? He didn't answer right away. His eyes flickered to the side, as if the weight of my question had crushed the air between us. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost distant. She thought she was protecting you. But in the end, it didn't matter. He sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. She was caught up in something. Much darker than either of us anticipated. I couldn't breathe. The words on the page blurred together as my vision drifted in and out of focus. She loved me, at least she said she did, and yet she had kept me in the dark. She had hidden everything from me, even while I trusted her, even while I believed I truly knew her. Ekin, I had been blind, hadn't I? All this time, convinced our life was solid and real. Now it felt like something fragile, carefully stacked, finally giving way. The truth she had buried for so long was spilling out at last, but it came too late. Nothing could return to what it had been. I read the letter again, slowly, as if repetition might change its meaning. It didn't. Each sentence felt like another small fracture in the foundation of everything I thought we had built. I'm sorry it ended. I never wanted you to feel this way. I hope you can understand someday. But I had to do this. For you, for all of us. The paper slipped from my hands. For a moment I simply stood there, the words echoing in the quiet room. My thoughts refused to settle. My emotions felt distant, unreachable. Her apology wasn't enough. It couldn't be. In the stillness, with the letter lying at my feet, I finally felt the weight of Sarah's absence. The woman I loved was no longer the woman I thought I knew, and the life we had shared felt like a story whose beginning I no longer understood. I picked the letter up again, carefully, as though it might fall apart if I wasn't gentle. My fingers traced its edges while I stared at the words. They didn't offer clarity, only distance. It wasn't enough. An apology couldn't undo the silence she had created, the secrets she had carried alone. There were things I would never fully know, and forgiveness felt far away, maybe unreachable. I placed the letter back on the desk, my hands trembling slightly. The house felt unnaturally quiet, the silence heavy and unyielding. I wanted to shout, to break something, to release what was building inside me, but the feeling had shifted. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something deeper, something unfamiliar. I walked into the living room. The space felt altered, filled with memories that no longer fit. Outside, the rain had grown heavier, its rhythm filling the air. I sat on the couch, hands folded, watching the world blur beyond the window. And maybe Sarah had believed she was protecting me. Maybe in her mind it was the right choice. But all that remained was a fractured image of the woman I loved and the uncertainty of how to move forward with it. And now I was left with nothing but the quiet that seemed to echo in every corner of the house, in the empty spaces between us. I didn't know if I could ever find my way back to the life I once thought I understood, and I didn't know if I ever wanted to. The sky was heavy with clouds, dark and swollen, as if it might burst open at any moment. I stood in the backyard, the grass damp beneath my shoes, my hands shoved deep into my coat pockets. The wind was biting, sharp against my skin, but I didn't move. I didn't need to. Everything felt like it had stopped, like time had paused, holding its breath, waiting for me to decide. The house behind me was quiet, but it wasn't the same silence it used to be. This one had weight, the kind that settles deep in your chest and won't let go. I hadn't slept well for days. The nights stretched on, endless and heavy, full of memories that felt like they belonged to someone else. The past week had unraveled everything I thought I knew about Sarah, about us, about the life I'd spent so many years building. Her secrets had torn through Mitre. Her secrets had torn through everything, like a storm that left nothing standing. I had spent hours in this house, pacing through the rooms, looking for pieces of her, pieces of me, trying to understand how we had ended up here. But the more I thought about it, the less I understood. It was all slipping away, every piece of the life I thought I knew, the love I thought we shared, the family we built, the trust I thought we had. It was all dissolving, one secret at a time, leaving me standing at the edge of something I couldn't name. I felt the weight of the truth pressing on me, like a stone in my chest, and I didn't know if I could carry it anymore. I turned toward the house, stepping inside. The door clicked shut behind me, the silence once again enveloping me. The kids were gone, out with their friends for the day, leaving the house empty, a hollow shell of what it had been. I moved through the room slowly, each step echoing through the empty spaces. Sarah's things were still everywhere. The half-think things as Sempertinger, Sarah's things were still everywhere. The half-filled mug on the counter, her jacket draped over the chair, the photo frames on the mantel. It all felt like a lie now. Every object, every piece of her that remained behind was a reminder of the woman she had been, the woman I thought I knew. I walked into the living room, the photo of our family still hanging on the wall. We were smiling in it, Sarah, the kids, me. We looked happy, but that happiness felt so far away now, as distant as a dream you wake up from and can't quite remember. I sat down on the couch, the fabric cool against my skin. The room was quiet again, but it wasn't comforting. It was suffocating. I thought about what Langley had said, about the secrets, about the dangerous people Sarah had been involved with, the project that had gotten out of hand. She had been part of something far bigger than I ever imagined, and I was left with nothing but the wreckage. I stood up, my breath shallow as I walked to the window, staring out at the street below. The cars passing by seemed so far away, like they belonged to a world I couldn't reach. I felt like I was standing on the edge of something, watching it all slip through my fingers. The truth had shattered everything, and now I was left to pick up the pieces. But the more I tried, the more I realized how little I knew about the life I had lived. How little I knew about the woman I had loved. Was there anything left to rebuild? Could I ever look at this house the same way again? Could I look at my children the same way? Could I ever trust again? I looked down at my hands, still trembling, and for a moment I wondered if I could keep going, if I could face the truth and live with it, or if I would be crushed under the weight of it all. I heard the front door creak open. The sound was too sharp in the silence. My heart skipped a beat, and I turned toward the hallway. The kids were home. I didn't know what to say to them. I didn't know how to explain this, how to make sense of it. They were still so young, so innocent, and I didn't want to burden them with the truth. But how could I hide it from them? How could I pretend everything was okay when everything was falling apart? I walked into the hallway just as Emma and Lucas came into the living room. They both looked up at me, their faces wary. They hadn't said much since I'd asked them about Sarah's secrets. The silence between us had been heavier than I'd ever felt, but now their eyes seemed to carry the weight of everything I couldn't say. I wanted to tell them it would be okay, that we would figure this out, but I didn't know if I believed it myself. The words stuck in my throat as I stood there, unsure of what to do. Emma spoke first, her voice softer than I expected. "Dad, we don't know everything either, but we want to help you. We want to be okay, too." And I stared at her, the sincerity in her eyes breaking something inside of me. She was too young for this, too young to be carrying this weight. And yet here she was, trying to hold us all together. I felt a rush of emotion I couldn't name, and for the first time in days I felt like I wasn't alone. I walked over to her, pulling her into a hug. Lucas followed, standing beside us. The three of us, holding each other, trying to make sense of the pieces that had shattered. And for a moment there was no storm, no weight of the truth pressing on my chest. Just the feeling of their arms around me, the quiet comfort of their presence. But as I pulled away, I knew. The truth had shattered everything. The truth had shattered everything, and it wasn't something I could simply rebuild. The pieces were too broken, too scattered. And yet here we were, standing together. What comes after the truth has shattered everything? I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew this: whatever came next, I wouldn't face it alone. The wind was biting against my skin, tugging at the collar of my coat as I stood at the edge of the grave. The sky above was gray, the clouds low, as though the world itself was holding its breath. The only sound was the rustle of leaves in the trees behind me, the soft murmur of nature in the background. Everything felt distant, like I was in a place that wasn't mine to be in. The earth beneath my feet felt solid, but it wasn't enough to hold me steady. I had been standing there for what felt like hours, the weight of the moment pulling me deeper into the past. But now there was something else stirring, a quiet space in me that I hadn't felt in days. I looked at the stone, her name etched into it, Sarah, the woman I had loved, the woman I thought I knew. But the truth had shattered that love. It had broken everything we'd built, and I'd been standing in the rubble ever since. I had spent days in the house, walking through empty rooms, unable to escape the silence that clung to everything, but today was different. There was a shift. Maybe it was the wind, the way it moved through the trees, or maybe it was the weight of the sky, heavy and pressing down, but something inside me felt lighter, like a veil had been lifted. I stood still, the quiet settling around me like a blanket, keeping me from running from the truth. Sarah was gone, and with her, a world I had built in my mind, a world of love, of trust, of family, had crumbled. But I wasn't standing at her grave anymore. I wasn't just mourning the past. I was looking at a future that was no longer defined by her secrets. It was still painful. It was still raw, but I was beginning to understand that pain didn't have to control me. I had spent so long clinging to the love I thought we shared, but now I had to let go. Not for her, not for what she had hidden, but for me, for the life I had left. I took a step forward, my boots crunching softly against the earth, the gravel underfoot shifting slightly with each step. The wind tugged at my coat again, but I didn't pull the fabric tighter. I let the wind in, let it remind me that the world didn't stop just because my world had. I looked down at the grave one more time. The letters were etched so neatly, so cleanly, but they felt so distant now. They didn't capture her secrets. They didn't hold the weight of the things I had learned in the past weeks. The woman I had known wasn't here. She never was. I had spent so many days wrestling with the truth, but now standing here in the cold, feeling the wind on my face, I realized something. The truth wasn't something that could destroy me, it was something that could set me free. I wasn't defined by Sarah's lies, I wasn't defined by the past anymore. The thoughts swirled in my head, heavy and hard to process. There was still so much I didn't know about Sarah, about what she had kept hidden, about the dangers she'd faced. But I couldn't keep chasing ghosts, I couldn't keep looking for answers that wouldn't come. I had spent enough time in the shadows, in the cold silence of things unsaid, of truths hidden. Now, standing here, I realized that the future was still mine to shape. The pieces of my life that had been shattered could still be rebuilt. Maybe not the same, but something new. Something more mine. I stood up straighter, feeling a quiet shift in my chest, a small breath of release. The knots of anger, betrayal, and sadness were still there, but they weren't the only things I carried anymore. There was something else now, something softer, a glimmer of peace maybe, a glimmer of hope, no matter how faint. It was enough to take the first step away from the grave, away from the past. I turned slowly, walking away from the grave, my feet crunching on the gravel as I moved. The wind followed me, its cold touch on my skin, but it no longer felt like it was chasing me. It felt like it was urging me forward. The sky above remained heavy, the storm clouds holding their secrets, but for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I had a direction. The future, uncertain as it was ahead of me. I walked back toward the car, my hands tucked into my coat pockets, feeling the weight of the world shift just slightly. The pain was still there. It would always be there, I knew that, but it wasn't everything. And it wasn't who I was. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if peace would ever come, but I knew this, I could shape it. I could choose how to live with the truth, with the pieces of Sarah's life that had been uncovered. I could choose how to move forward. As I climbed into the car and closed the door behind me, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The road ahead was waiting.